It's time now to turn to Doug Keiser, anarcho-capitalist, speculator, investor, author. Doug, welcome.
Thanks, Max, and it is always a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, so a lot of people are familiar with your nonfiction work. You're moving into fiction. Now, is the gold market gotten that dull?
No, it's got nothing to do with that. I'm very involved in the commodities markets because commodities have been going down since about 2011. And they're getting very, very cheap again. So I'm very, very interested in them again. But the reason I'm writing novels as opposed to nonfiction is there's a lot of stuff that, especially in today's world, you can say in the form of fiction that perhaps you'd best not say in the form of nonfiction.
Well, it's been true throughout history. The poets have found the ability to express their political dissent in ways that get around censorship and other things. So you're following in a great tradition there. I'm reading this is the book, the second in the series of 7. This is called Drug Lord. I'm reading the back page here. So this is Ayn Rand with guns and drugs. I mean, right there, that sounds good.
That's pretty good. The first one was about a gold mining fraud that our hero, Charles Knight, uncovers in Africa, and he gets involved in a bush war, makes a couple $100 million, has it stolen from him. And so now, after 7 years running around the world, he decides to become a drug lord.
Now, part of this drug is, it prevents people from lying to themselves.
What we're trying to do is uncover the dark recesses of the human psyche. These are morality tales, actually, because there are people that get killed in these books, and I've been of the opinion for some years that there are some people that just need killing.
Oh, well, Jamie Dimon, for example.
Well, let's put our finger on him.
I meant that in jest, of course. I meant that in the poetic sense of the word. I'm using these words poetically. I don't literally believe that the capital punishment should be applied to someone like Jamie Dimon for financial terrorism. I don't literally believe that.
Well, we're speaking as fiction writers, kind of. We can say these things jokingly. We're like comedians. Comedians can say anything.
Well, satire, again, it's
satire.
Where folks go historically. Swift, Jonathan Swift, of course, with Gulliver's Travels, wrote satirically about things. The Wizard of Oz is a satirical treatise on the gold standard, right? So you getting your message out. I mean, I guess the way to describe Doug Keiser in one way is someone who, that the world is their oyster. Another great writer, Shakespeare, made this point. And you look at the world and you go to where you are wanted the most. You've made that statement. And you feel no need to live in a country that you feel doesn't want you to live there. Is that still true? And can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely true. I've been to 155 countries. I've lived in 10. Lived defined as I've been there long enough that I've had to buy a house or rent one. And I don't believe that you should act like a plant rooted to some place. It's not a good survival strategy for a human being. So, and anyway, the world is getting smaller and smaller, and all of these nation states that cover it like a skin disease are becoming more and more oppressive. So it's incumbent upon you to be air mobile.
To be mobile like this, you have a unique skill set. And, some folks are good hairdressers and they can travel around the world. But you are a triple-star rated investor. And you invest in these places, and you're successful. And I'm struck here because the disease here of not knowing who you are, that has to do with successful investing, doesn't it? Because if you think about successful investors over history, the fallacy most people make is that they forget who they are, and they stray from what I would say is the blindingly obvious. Your thoughts?
You're absolutely right, Max, because your greatest danger as an investor is the space in between your ears. It's your psychology that tends to destroy you as an investor, where you get over-enthusiastic, you get over-depressed, you think you know more than you know. So investing is a matter of psychology, I think, as much as anything else. And the reason why I try to make the world my oyster is if I just looked, here we are in Aspen, Colorado. I live here during the northern summer. And if I just looked here in Aspen for opportunities, I'd find some. But if I go abroad, I'll find a lot more.
Yeah.
So that's why.
So let's talk a little bit about your conversion to Bitcoin. Now you've had a moment. You've come to the Damascus. You've converted. Doug.
Well,
what happened? Did Jeff Berwick take you out back and rough you up a little bit and beat some sense into you, or what happened?
Berwick's an old friend of mine, and he was an early adopter of these things. Look, it was back in 2013, and I was in Cafayate, Argentina, where a lot of interesting people wandered through. And a young Belgian guy, I bought him lunch, and he promoted me on Bitcoin back then. And he said, thanks for lunch. Here's a physical Bitcoin, which they had back in those days. I said, thank you. Cheapest lunch I ever had, because Bitcoin is now trading, I don't know, $4,000. But I found out that that physical Bitcoin, it's an artifact now, $10,000. I got to buy this guy an exotic dinner. I didn't, the reason I didn't jump into it when he promoted me on it, however, was that I looked at things from a rational point of view. Aristotle's 5 characteristics of a good money: durable, divisible, convenient, consistent. Bitcoin passes those tests, more or less. Problem is, what was the value proposition? It's a fiat currency. I didn't realize that the real value of Bitcoin, and I think I'm right, is as a transfer mechanism to obviate the SWIFT system, to obviate foreign exchange controls, to allow, and also to allow people, 75% of the human race that lives in these backward countries that have kwaches and pulas and gourds and pesos for money, they can't save money. And if they do, they can't get it out of the country. Bitcoin solves that, which is why I missed that at the time. So we got a little bubble in these cryptocurrencies now, but I think it's going to be a much bigger bubble.
Well, I think, right, part and parcel with this idea of knowing yourself is knowing when you need to rethink something. And that is very difficult for people to say, you know, maybe I need to rethink something. But, you know, another theme you've mentioned here is you're on your travels and you are not a fan of the nation state or the governments, countries. And I've said, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, that Bitcoin is to the nation state what the printing press was to, let's say, the Catholic Church. They had a monopoly on information, the printing press came along, and then the Renaissance and the Enlightenment came after that. The nation state, as you see with China, trying to push back, they have been defanged in their abilities. Your thoughts?
I think, however, you're right, but I think that China is actually, because they want to get rid of the dollar, why should they use their, maybe not frenemies, currency? I think they're going to be the first adopter of cryptocurrency as an alternative to the yuan. And I think this is just a transition period for China. Unfortunately, listen, what you said about the printing press, it's like gunpowder and other technologies. They liberate the average man, and Bitcoin is doing that. But unfortunately, what these governments are doing, because is they're trying to get rid of all cash. They've eliminated gold, they're trying to get rid of cash, and in the future, they're going to try to make it so you can't use anything but a cryptocurrency, a government cryptocurrency, and this is going to be a disaster from the point of view of personal freedom when that happens.
Right, to be fair, the government centralized cryptocurrency is much different than Bitcoin, which is decentralized, non-centrally controlled.
They don't like competition, though. They're going to try to kill Bitcoin.
They will try, but we can talk about it for a while, but I don't think that they will be successful. For one reason is that the whole Bitcoin can just move to another territory. In other words, the nation state relies on border control, other machinations to which they have lose control. But I just kind of want to move on here. So you, one of the reasons that you like living in places going through chaos is because the governments have more room to carve out something for yourself because the governments are preoccupied with their chaos. Right. And so you end up in countries that are maybe, you know, on not as stable as maybe they would hope to be. Is the U.S. getting to the point now where it's approaching a moment of chaos, where people are going to start coming here, figuring, oh, you know, this country's in chaos. I'll move here and just carve out some freedom. What are you thinking on that? I
think what's going on between these so-called blue counties and red counties is that, listen, I went through the late 60s and early 70s when there were riots and bombings and everything was really kind of out of control. But the situation today impresses me as much more serious than that. This is like pre-Civil War type of things where people are just philosophically, they just can't even talk to each other. So it could get nasty here. I don't mind being a foreigner in a country where it's upset, because if you're a foreigner, you're a ghost. They don't really care about you. You're an outsider. And as a foreigner, I mean, I've been treated very well for buying houses and that, and I was paid to live in these places. You buy an asset really cheap, things get better, you sell it for a lot more, and go to the next place where that happens. It makes your life much richer having these weird experiences, which I happen to like.
Right, well, it seems like crypto and you are a match made in heaven, because everything that you talk about that are the shortcomings of government and fiat money and central banks, you're liberated via Bitcoin. You can go into any country you want with a 12-word seed password in your mind, not even any hardware, go create the wallet on any connection, and there's your cash.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's so much better than using the SWIFT system or the banking system. I hate them both. I'm glad that the cryptocurrencies are going to destroy SWIFT and hopefully destroy most of these banks, which are a very negative influence on the welfare of the average man today.
Let's, I got about a minute left, so let's talk about like what's happening. You're a shrewd observer of the banks and central banks and want to get your thoughts on the Fed, U.S. Federal Reserve says they're going to unwind their $4 trillion balance sheet. They think that that's time to unwind, that they're going to start selling these assets they bought over the years. Well, how's that going to go, Doug?
Oh, my God. I mean, the fact that anybody even pays attention to what that silly old lady says, she's got no understanding of economics or the real world. I mean, she's an academic living in a bubble. Janet Yellen, I'm talking about. The chances of their being able to do that are slim and none, and slim's out of town. Because as we speak, Max, we entered this gigantic financial hurricane in 2007, went through the leading edge, 7, 8, 9, 10. Big eye of the storm, huge hurricane. I think as we speak, we're moving into the trailing edge of the hurricane. It's going to be much worse, much different, and much longer lasting than what we went through in those days. And the only thing these stupid central banks can do is print even more money, even though they're printing trillions. They've already reduced interest rates to 0 or less, which I thought was metaphysically impossible. There's no more arrows in their quiver. So hold on to your hat for the years to come.
All right, Doug.